Okay, welcome everyone to the April 2019 HR Best Practices webinar. My name is Kevin Mosher. Hopefully people can hear me. I am, well, here we go. I think I even have a picture of who I am, but anyway, my name is Kevin Mosher. I'm a partner at the law firm Thompson Co. Up in our managing partner up in our Minnesota office, and an HR certified specialist in labor and employment law. And I am really excited. So those of you who were with us last month on the FMLA Basics webinar know how much I love. If you remember, you probably, I don't know why you would, but I remember saying how much I love FMLA and FMLA issues and presenting on FMLA issues. And I'm really excited to present on the FMLA for geniuses. So we're going to ramp it up and talk about a lot of nuances. And if you need some basics, you're welcome to go on our website at myHRgenius.co, so myHRgenius all run together .co, and you can watch or listen to the webinar from last month, and it's really, I think, a pretty good overview of FMLA, just some of the basics with it. But then this month, I'm just going to assume you are a pretty fluid practitioner and HR professional, or somebody involved with HR that can keep up with FMLA issues, because we are going to cover a lot today. And I'll try to get as deep as I can, but I've put a lot of topics in here for us to cover. And that's me. I am, like I said, really excited about this. If you indicated that you need credits for today's presentation, those once we confirm attendance and all that, those will be emailed out to you in the next couple business days, once we get all the confirmation going and all the things that we have to do before we send out those certificates. So yeah, that's me, and I'm really excited about doing the presentation. For those of you who are not familiar, we have a program called the myHRgenius program, and it's an on-call HR, don't have to worry about legal fees program. So use this as much as you want. Call our legal HR hotline at any of our offices, and you'll get HR specialist attorneys like myself that you can work with at very low cost. So it's a really, really great price point and a really great legal resource to support your HR team or your company generally, if you don't have an HR team in particular. These are the things that you get with the program, including this webinar series. And I'm really excited. We don't have I don't have a date that I can tell you to go, but we'll send out information on it. But we'll be starting a podcast series as well on HR topics du jour. And I know the first couple topics that we'll be addressing are the Social Security no-match letters that have just recently come back and from Social Security. If those of you who have gotten them, I know there's a lot of difficulties understanding them. So we're going to do a podcast on Social Security no-match letters, and as well as the new FLSA salary level test and all that. If you have any questions along the way today, you are welcome to type them in the Q&A. There's a lot to cover today. I cannot guarantee that I'm going to be able to answer a lot of the Q&A on the fly. If you do have a question and I don't get to it, certainly email or call me, follow up with me if you'd like, or type it in. I'll try to circle back to you. But yeah, feel free to definitely type in on the Q&A part, the question part, and send it along the way. And if I do have time, I will try to review those quickly and respond. So, okay, we're going to break this up into a few categories. We're going to talk about medical certifications, which invariably, and I know some of you have just probably decades of experience of working with the FMLA, but medical certifications and how to handle those is always just one of those topics that is, I find always challenging. Doctors say crazy stuff in medical certifications. They don't fill them out completely. So it's just a lot of questions about medical certifications, and then also what the employer's rights are with the medical certifications. Like, what can you do if the person doesn't return it at all? But you know that they've been seeking medical care. So there's just a lot of questions there. We'll also talk about some some of the let's just call it like some of the weapons in your arsenal as an HR professional or employer with regard to intermittent leave, benefits, wages, reinstatements. There's just a number of topics where, FMLA obviously gives employees a lot of rights, and it's hard to sometimes see the light at the end of the tunnel. A lot of employees are really, really good at gaming FMLA and gaming ADA situations, and maybe even some paid leave and short-term, long-term disability options that they have. But there are also things that we can do, with regard to those employees to kind of offset what they are trying to do when they're trying to game the system and take off as much and hurt your business and operations, as which often is the result of what they taking all the time off and everything like that. Okay, so let's jump into medical certifications right away, and here's what you need to know. So medical certifications. So when we talk about the medical certification, it should be pretty clear that it is one of the three primary forms that we use with the FMLA, right? And if you are a covered employer by FMLA and you are not using the Department of Labor forms, I recommend that you do. You can find those if you just Google DOL FMLA forms. You will get to the DOL website, the Department of Labor website, that shows you all the forms, and you can download them, and I suggest using them. And the medical certification is the one that we send out to employees when we have an idea. So we do the notification of rights and responsibilities, and we do that when we get notice from an employee, either directly or indirectly, that the time off that they need, that they're requesting, time off that's being requested, is potentially covered by FMLA, and they may be an eligible employee under the FMLA. And if those are terms that you're not familiar with, you can go and watch the webinar from last month, because I talked about them extensively. So we do the notification of rights and responsibilities. Well, when something is potentially either a chronic condition or a serious health condition, not a pregnancy, because we don't really need a medical certification for bonding, for post birth bonding leave. So we would do a medical certification if it's a potential serious health condition, or if it's a chronic condition, some sort of incapacity, right? So if it's medically related for ourselves or for a family member that's covered by the FMLA. And so you're going to do the medical certification, and you're going to give it to the employee at the time that you provide them with the notice of rights and responsibilities. And that medical certification itself, there's a box on there, and you want to make sure that you mark the box that says that the employee needs to return it within 15 days, and it has to be completed. Now, employees are going to, almost in all these such circumstances, they are going to take that medical certification and they're going to give it to their doctor, their medical provider, and they're going to have the medical provider turn it in for them. But what you need to know as an employer is that medical certification, it is the employee's responsibility to return it within the 15 days. This is 15 calendar days. So the employee needs to return it within the 15 days. If the employee says, my doctor ate it and lost it and doesn't know how to do fax or whatever it is, it doesn't matter what the excuse is. It doesn't matter, because it is the employee's responsibility to make sure that medical certification gets turned into you within the 15 days. If the employee does not turn it into you within the 15 days, then it delays the employee's being covered by the FMLA. So if the employee just, one day just doesn't show up, of course they, never give you the 30 days notice that they're supposed to under the FMLA. And let's just say something happens, they, have some sort of injury just out of nowhere, and they just stop showing up today. They stop showing up today on a Thursday, and then you get the FMLA, the medical certification request, and the notice of rights and responsibility out to them, and you get it out to them, and they get it on Monday, and they call in, they say, yeah, I'm something, car accident or whatever it was, and so I'm laid up, I'm seeing a doctor, yada yada. Okay, so they get the medical certification, they've got the 15 days to get it back to you. If they don't get it back to you within the 15 days, then the absence starting today on Thursday, today's being their first day that they're gone, that absence is no longer covered by the FMLA. If they don't get that medical certification in, the absence is not going to be protected by federal law. You can, at that point, apply your attendance policies. That probably is an unexcused day of attendance. If they turn it in on the 16th day, then they're going to be covered starting tomorrow. Right, so we just have a rolling calendar on this. More likely than not, the medical certifications, if the employee doesn't do it within 15 days, my experience is that they just never do it. And so in that situation, then again, we apply our attendance policy, and whatever the attendance policy says, we're going to count that as potentially unexcused absence. And if that results in termination, then it results in termination under your policy. But we want to treat the person evenly under your attendance policy. The medical certifications themselves are on them. The doctor is going to say, let's just pretend that it came back to you, and the doctor is going to say, like, yes, the employee needs to be gone today. Today is today, I think it's the 19th. So today on April 19th, the employee is going to be gone, and the employee will be gone incapacitated until let's just say forever. Uncertain, like the employee's got some sort of debilitating thing where we're just not sure when it's going to get back. Well, you can generally request a new medical certification, an updated medical certification, every 30 days. However, if the medical certification itself, let's just say it says the person's going to be gone from April 19th until May 1st. In that situation, you could, and then the employee doesn't come back on May 2nd, even though the medical certification said that the doctor said that the employee would be back on May 1st, and the employee doesn't come back on or it would go through May 1st. The employee is supposed to come back on May 2nd. The employee doesn't come back, and the employee says to you, like, well, the problem's continuing, I can't come back. At that point, you can then ask for a new medical certification. And so you would then give the employee a new medical certification saying, I need an updated one. A lot of times with debilitating or chronic situations, we get no end date. It's not like April 19th to May 1st. We don't get that because the doctor really doesn't know or can't opine as to when the condition might end, or maybe the condition will never end. Well, in that situation, we can ask for an updated medical certification every 6 months. Now, what happens in a situation, at least every 6 months, right? And so every 6 months, when the employee asks for time off, so we time it when the employee asks for time off work. So 6 months from now, if the employee asks for a day off of work because of seizures or something, then we can ask for a new medical certification to see if the doctor has anything else. But we can ask for a new one. If the doctor, let's just say the doctor gives you a medical certification, and the medical certification says that the employee will be gone from April 19th until August 1st, or having some sort of condition where they need some sort of reduced leave, like they have migraine headaches and they're going to come every, once a week. And the way it's playing out, however, this happens often, the way it plays out is that the employee is missing more than 1 day a week. And for several weeks misses, Mondays and Fridays, right? Because suddenly it's the football season or whatever. And they, suddenly it's like they like 4-day weekends, I guess. And their migraines happen on Mondays and Fridays. So instead of but the doctor said that it would only happen once a week. And instead, the way it's playing out is that it's happening twice a week. And the doctor says that it should last until August 1st. So less than 6 months, more than 30 days. Well, in that situation, typically you wouldn't get a new medical certification until after August 1st. But because there's been a change in the circumstances with the employee, where the on the ground situation is not matching up with what is actually occurring for the employee, with the medical information, then in that situation, you can ask for a new medical certification before August 1st, even though the doctor said it would be going like this until August 1st. And the reason you can do it is because the employee situation is not reflecting what information you got in the medical certification. Okay, that was a lot for that slide. They will not all be that long. Otherwise, this will be like a 3-hour webinar. Okay, so clarifications. What often happens is that you will get the medical certification back from the doctor. Let's just say you get it back within 15 days. Great. But there will be gaps. There will be things missing on it. Maybe the doctor didn't fill out some information. Oftentimes the doctors don't want to say like how long the condition might last, right? And so there are two types of deficiencies. There's an incomplete form and there's an insufficient form. If it's incomplete, where one or more sections aren't completed, like they just didn't put in how long the condition would last, or they didn't give any definition as to what the nature of the condition was. If it's incomplete, then in that situation, you need to go back to the employee. You should not be calling the doctor. The only reason you can call the doctor is if you need to verify the authenticity of the doctor. And I've had that come up where it's been pretend doctors. You can call to confirm, dear, hey, hospital, or hey, whatever it is, urgent care, did you provide a medical certification for this person from this doctor? And then you can ask for that sort of clarification. Otherwise, all the information needs to go through the employee. It's the employee's responsibility. The employee needs to take it back to the doctor. So if it's incomplete or if it's insufficient, you need to circle back to the employee. And so you would say, look, written notice to the employee. It's either incomplete or it's insufficient. Maybe it's even both. But you need to clarify like what the problem is, point it out to the employee. You could even just highlight on the form what needs to be completed if it's either of them. The employee gets 7 days. Gets seven days to correct it. And then if the employee doesn't circle back within the 7 days, you can, just like if the medical certification is more than 15 days old, if the employee doesn't circle back, then you can deny the coverage, deny the FMLA, or at least delay the FMLA, just like with the medical certification being late. And so again, in that situation, we put the onus back on the employee, shifts the burden to the employee, and then the employee needs to come back and get the information that you've requested from them. Okay. Authenticity of the medical certification. Like I said, you could, so I did say that you can contact the doctor to clarify, to make sure that it's authentic, which is true. The one thing I didn't say is that's here on this slide, is that the direct supervisor can never do that. So I'm assuming I'm talking to HR people and business owners and other people and admin on this webinar primarily. But the direct supervisor should never be the one to directly contact a medical provider, even if it's just to authenticate the medical certification itself. If the other thing that often happens is, and this gets expensive, so my experience is that most employers don't want to do this, but do you have the option to seek a second opinion just because the employee, comes back to you and the employee, provides the medical certification from their doctor, but you don't believe it, you don't buy it? Could you do a second opinion? Yes. And that can be with your doctor. So you could send the employee to your doctor, but you have to pay for it. And so in that situation, you can have your doctor fill out the medical certification. If the two doctors disagree, which is kind of what you're hoping for, right? So if your doctor disagrees with their doctor and you're just not sure, then you would go to a third doctor, and you and the employee have to kind of discuss and negotiate and agree on that. And ultimately, you have to agree on a third medical practitioner to review the employee, and then and again, you pay for that one too. And then the third doctor is going to be the tie-breaking vote, basically. So in that situation, again, you're going to go get a third opinion. But again, my experience is that most employers don't do this because it's pretty expensive and it's a lot of heartache, and for the most part, companies, are understanding that FMLA is just an obligation that they have to provide to employees. But could you do this? Absolutely, especially if you've got an employee that you just disagree with and think that they're totally faking what they're doing. Some nuances. One of the things that comes up for me periodically, probably like once a year, is can an employee get the medical certification, seek the treatment from abroad? And the answer is yeah. It doesn't have to be a U.S. medical practitioner. It could be a nurse even. I mean, it doesn't have to be a doctor per se. It just has to be a medical provider. But it could be somebody from another country. And that, and so, yeah, it could, if the person is injured or is just deciding to seek medical care outside the United States, would that work? Would a medical certification from an international practitioner work? Yeah, it generally would. It just has to come back to you in English, and it's not your burden to have to translate it from whatever language it is being done in. So let's look at a couple scenarios. I already laid out one talking about like the April 19th date that I was giving you. Here are some that we can kind of see in writing. So scenario one, the employee has a chronic condition, so something that's just going to last at least 12 months. And in that situation, you could do an initial certification, and again, you would do the initial certification when medical certification when the employee does the first time that they want off. So in that scenario, like once they need some time off, say they have some seizures, then you would trigger the medical certification notice to them, and then you could do it every 6 months. Again, trigger the date that you do the medical certification, triggering when they next need some time off. And then the one other thing that's not listed here is could you at that point also ask for a new eligibility? So we talked about this last month on the when we talk about employee eligibility, and sometimes businesses change. Sometimes employees miss so much time that they no longer meet the 1,250 hours requirement. Well, once you approve the leave of absence with the notice, the designation notice form that we use, once you designate the person qualified for a chronic condition, you can then reevaluate that employee's eligibility every year. So on at least 1 year later. So if I'm eligible today, April 19th, 2019, if I'm eligible today and I've got some sort of chronic condition and I miss a ton of time of work and I take all my PTO on top of it, and for whatever reason, coming a year, April 20th, 2020, a year later from now, the HR, I need another day off for seizures, right? And the HR person looks at it and they're like, hey, Kevin missed all this work. He didn't hit the 1,250, the 1,250 hours of quote work requirement. He didn't put that in the last year. Could I be denied eligibility? Yes. You can only be denied a year later on some sort of chronic or long-lasting condition, but my eligibility can be reevaluated a year later. If I had some sort of intermittent thing, like let's just say I wanted some time off for, like, my wife had a baby, and if I wanted some time off on top of it, and they did my eligibility like a few months ago, like let's say January of 2019, before my 1 year came up on my chronic condition, could the HR person reevaluate and look at it and do all the math and say, well, you're not eligible for the bonding leave? Yes. But I would still be eligible even until April 19th of 2020 because of the 1 year grandfathering type of thing. I would, even though I was denied the bonding leave in January because I might not be eligible, I could still take the time off for the seizures because the seizures were certified April 19th, 2019. So come January 2020, if I want some bonding leave, I could be denied for eligibility on that, even though I could take some time off for the seizures, right? This gets complicated. Okay, so scenario 2, the condition will last 25 days. So the condition persists beyond the 25 days, we can recertify, that's okay, right? So that was the situation where I gave, we're at April 19th to May 1, less than 30 days. And if I need more time off in this situation, the condition lasts 25 days. If suddenly I need time off on the 26th day, could I take it? Yeah, but I would need a new medical certification, and HR should ask me for a new medical certification. If there's no duration listed on the medical certification, recertify every 30 days, right? If the doctor says that the condition will last a long time, more than 6 months, then at a minimum, we can always recertify every 6 months. I don't want to get too much into the designation notice because we do have a lot to cover today. And I think the designation notice is kind of self-explanatory. But I do want to point out that we do need to, when we designate somebody for FMLA, we need to do it within 5 business days of when we receive the medical certification, or at least from when we receive notice. So if it's a bonding request, we need to do the designation notice probably right away. We're not going to ask for a medical certification. But if we do a medical certification, you need to kick out the designation notice completed to the employee. You need to kick that out to them within 5 business days. And so that's the timing for that form. If you are requiring a fitness for duty, and I want to be careful with fitness for duties, because really you should be notifying the employee in advance that a fitness for duty will be expected. So this is, I guess, the designation notice is you notifying them in advance. But I generally don't recommend being, let's just legalese willy-nilly about it, where we just pick and choose who we are doing fitness for duties. In a perfect world, we identify safety-sensitive jobs or jobs that require some sort of physicality to them, and then we just say, like, okay, anytime somebody's going to miss some FMLA, some time off work in this job because of a serious health condition, we are going to require a fitness for duty. That's the most non-discriminatory way to do this. And then until the person turns in the fitness for duty, and we want to mark it on the designation notice that's required, until the person turns it in, then and meets the requirements, then we can delay their return to work for the until we get the fitness for duty. This is a good reminder of timing, right? So I've been talking a little bit about timing. So here's the stuff. So somebody brings to you, of course, always 30 days in advance. Always happens. If you ever have an employee not give you 30 days in advance, like, call me up. It'll just astound me. And I'm really kidding about that. So we find out directly and indirectly that the employee's time off is potentially covered for FMLA, right? So we do the notice of rights and responsibilities. We're going to get that off the DOL website. We do the notice of rights and responsibilities. We find out it's because of a serious health condition. We're going to give the employee the medical certification to be completed by the doctor, medical provider, and return it to us within 15 days, right? So this is the timing. So kick out the notice within 5 days, kick out the medical certification along with it. If we get the medical certification back and we need clarification, in writing, we send it back to the employee and we identify where it's deficient or where it's insufficient, and we give them 7 calendar days to get that back to us. We then, same with authentication, the employee has the 7 days for the authentication. And then we get the information. Let's just say it's great. We've got all the stuff that we need for medical certification. And in that situation, we then kick out the designation notice to the employee within five business days. And so we kick out the designation notice within 5 business days to them, and then boom, they're on FMLA. And then if we need to do another medical certification, we might need to do that. But then that's your basic flow of things. Okay, so let's go to intermittent leave. everybody loves intermittent leave. It's fantastic. It never, gets confused with ADA. But intermittent leave, of course, is the bane for every HR practitioner's, existence, right? They don't tell you about this is my theory. So I went to law school and not, school for HR. But my theory is that they don't teach you about intermittent leave when you're training to be an HR professional, because they want you to actually still go into HR. Because I think if people knew about intermittent leave in advance, it's like one of those things that it just might talk too many people out, and so like nobody would ever come into HR, right? So intermittent leave. So intermittent leave is, by definition, it is that, right? So we get 12 weeks, right? So let's just step back. So we get 12 weeks of FMLA per year, and we define a year in a number of different ways, but you get 12 weeks per year. And the intermittent leave is when somebody, so it's easy when somebody has a baby, right? So it's like, okay, well, you need some bonding leave. Here you go. You take your 12 weeks off. But intermittent leave is because of a serious health condition or a chronic condition that requires that the employee misses time intermittently. So in my situation with the migraines or with the seizures, you're missing Fridays, you're missing partial days on Thursdays, you're missing whatever, you're missing an hour here, an hour there. It could be for prenatal care, but it's never for bonding leave. So an intermittent allows the employee with the medical certification, it allows them to say, hey, I've got this medical situation, and I don't need just a big block of time off. I need every Friday during the summer off, right? It just so happens that, man, those Fridays, they're terrible for my carpal tunnel. And, it's just, man, a whole week. And I really need to take off those Fridays. Here's a doctor that says I have to take off Fridays just through the summer. For whatever reason, it gets a lot better in the winter. And, I can work on Fridays. So that's intermittent leave. It is so hard for you to question it. But again, what is your response? Your response is the second medical opinion. That's how you can attack this. You can attack it with the second medical opinion and potentially third if you need to say, hey, no, your carpal tunnel doesn't necessarily just need you off on Fridays. It might be that you can't work from here and there because of carpal tunnel, but it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to miss on Fridays. So, you get a second medical opinion and then see what a third medical opinion goes. Intermittent leave doesn't include parental leave. And I understand if you want to allow like bonding leave, when I say parental leave, I mean bonding leave. If you want to allow, returning mothers or returning fathers to do something like this, which is a very common ask from, particularly from mothers who have just given birth. They want to take 8 weeks off of FMLA or parental leave, like bonding leave. They want to take 8 weeks off after the birth of the child, and then to spread out, to like extend out their time at home. Instead of taking the full 12, they want to take 8 and then double the remaining 4 weeks to another 8 weeks of working 20 hours per week. So they want to spread it out by coming back and, soft landing, working 20 hours per week. And hey, I've got a bunch of kids. I think that's great. And I completely understand why people would want to do that. The FMLA doesn't give that right to them. So if you want to as an employer, if you want to make the decision to allow FMLA intermittently for parents who are on bonding leave, that is totally fine. The law doesn't require that you do it. The law just gives bonding leave a block of time and not intermittent leave. Intermittent leave is just for serious health conditions and for chronic conditions. The intermittent leave has to be medically necessary. And again, we're going to get that off of the medical certification form. So if the doctor comes back with the medical certification form and says that, hey, the intermittent leave, needing Fridays off for the next 3 or 4 months, it's medically necessary because of the person's migraines, because of the person's seizures. because of the person's carpal tunnel, whatever it is, they have to prove that it's medically necessary, that the intermittent leave comes and goes. So it's a little bit higher of a standard than just a normal serious health condition. But again, most doctors are more than happy to put that down on the medical certification for the employees. So what can you do if you get an intermittent leave request? Let's just say it's for a legitimate chronic type of condition. And let's just go back with my to my seizure. That's always the easiest one to understand. So we go to seizures, right? And seizures just, they come and go. And maybe for some people they have an idea of when they come, but for a lot of people they just don't know when they're going to come and go. So the limitations in this. So you've got limitations, right? So you could, as an employer, right, the employee is entitled to leave, so they get up to 12 weeks, and it's going to take forever to get through the 12 weeks if you're missing like a day here and a day there, right? They'll probably, miss a day here and a day there for the whole year before they even exhaust their 12 weeks. But in that situation, could you look at the job and say, look, the seizures just don't work for us. This job, I can't have you having seizures for whatever reason. Maybe it's a safety reason, whatever it is. But it doesn't work out for you. Could you transfer them out of that job? Yes. You have to pay them the same amount of money and the same benefits. So oftentimes, if you're transferring somebody out, it's to a lesser job with less responsibility. And in that situation, so you're going to have to pay them more than you would normally pay in that job. So that's a problem. And, but it's something you could do. You would just do it temporarily. You also can't do it to be mean to the person, to try to retaliate against the person. And so, you would just do it temporarily. So if the condition is such that you would just be moving the person temporarily until the condition is over to a different job, the FMLA would allow you to do that. It's just, practically speaking, it often doesn't make a lot of sense because you're probably then overpaying in a lot of situations for the work, and the person isn't probably as well qualified for that job as they are for the job that they're currently in. But can you do it? Yes. You definitely can transfer them to another job. You just have to pay them and give them the same type of benefits. Okay. We're going to move on from intermittent leave and medical certifications. We're going to move to key employees. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, primarily because it doesn't affect a lot of your FMLA situations. But for those employees that are the top 10% wage earners, and when we look at wages, we look at all forms of compensation, discretionary, non-discretionary forms of compensation. If stock options don't count, like 401k matches and stuff, we don't have to look at that, but we have to look at pretty much W-2 compensation. And if the person asks for time off work, and they have to be salaried exempt as well. That's the other thing. It can't be some really high wage earning non-exempt employee. So that employee, let's just call them the CEO. The CEO comes to you and says, hey, I need some time off. I'm going to go have surgery, and then I need a period of recovering. And so I'm going to be gone for 12 weeks. And here's my medical certification. And CEO says, see you later. Great. So you've never liked the CEO. Let's just pretend, right? You've never liked the CEO in the first place. And so you kind of want to get back at the CEO when you think like, normally I'm like the HR person, the CEO never like pays attention to me. Now I'm going to get the CEO back. So what do? How do you get the CEO back? Okay. So the way to get the CEO back is to, on the notice, you would notify the CEO that he or she is a key employee. And there's a little box on the form, say that that you are a key employee, and that this may, and the language is basically that this may impact your right of reinstatement. It doesn't stop the FMLA itself. The CEO still gets to take FMLA, right? Top 10% wage earner with a 75-mile radius, they get to take FMLA. But Reinstatement is one of the things that you get from FMLA, right? You get 12 weeks off, you get reinstatement, you get continued group medical coverage. That's basically it. Like, that's what you get with the FMLA. But key employees can have the reinstatement taken off the table. So if you analyze the situation and you say, and you find out, with the board of directors or whoever, and you find out that, hey, we are going to suffer greatly. We are going to experience, quote, substantial and grievous economic injury because of the CEO's, to reinstate the CEO, not because of the departure, but because of the reinstatement. And normally at the C-suite, what this really means is, hey, we can't find a replacement CEO for 3 months. That's not how it works. Like, if we're going to offer this job to somebody, we need to put the carrot out there that they are going to have the job, until they get fired in a year or two. So we need to offer them a real job. And so we just can't bring somebody incompetent in the CEO role if they know they're only going to be here for 3 months. So that's where, like, our business is going to suffer. And so that's where you could say to the CEO that's going on FMLA, well, you are a key employee, but we really can't recruit for the job. And so we cannot guarantee your right of reinstatement. And you got to give this to them in notice, right? So you click the box on the notice of rights and responsibilities that they're a key employee. And then when you it might be sometime during the FMLA, while the person's on FMLA, once you make the determination that you will suffer serious and grievous, substantial and grievous economic injury because you are trying to recruit for this job and you can't recruit anybody, for example, and you're finding like, no, we've got a good candidate, but this candidate, they want the job permanently. They don't want it for just like 3 months. Then you're like, fine, we're going to go with that candidate. Then you send the CEO on FMLA a notice in writing saying, we are not going to be able to reinstate you. The CEO still is on FMLA. They're still on group medical, but the right to reinstatement's been taken off the table. They still have the ability a week before they come back, like on the 11th week, they still have the ability to reach out to HR and say, hey, I want my job back. At that point, you then once again confirm, assuming it's still true, you once again confirm with them, no, sorry, your right of reinstatement's denied. After the 12 weeks, you then terminate their employment. HR wins the day once again. But that's how it plays. That's how it plays out with key employees. But the key here is at any time, as just a matter of practice, anytime you get somebody in the top 10% within that 75-mile radius, because you might have multiple locations, anybody in the top 10%, you want to, at a minimum, check that key employee box on the notice of rights and responsibilities to at least put them on notice that their reinstatement might be denied. Doesn't mean you have to, because you still have to go through the other steps of like, ascertaining whether or not substantial and grievous economic damage, and then also confirming that yes, we are, going to pull the reinstatement. So I mean, there's a process here, but at a minimum, best practice, you want to notify those people, anybody in the top 10%, every time they ask for FMLA. You want to notify them on the notice of rights and responsibilities by checking that box. Okay, moving on to wages. FMLA is generally unpaid, right? And I want, a lot of times FMLA is paid, but it's really, but to be clear, FMLA is never paid. What happens is we substitute other forms of pay or benefits while somebody is on FMLA, right? And so a lot of times I have employers call me and they'll be like, well, I mean, the employee's getting paid on FMLA. They're getting work comp, and I'll be like, well, how are they getting paid? They're getting work comp. They're getting short or long-term disability. They're using their vacation, their sick leave, whatever it is. It's like, okay, that's fine. FMLA is an unpaid leave of absence. And one other point, a little bit off topic, if the employee comes to you and says, hey, I have this medical condition, and your response is, okay, do you like need anything with it? Well, no, I'm just letting you know I've got this medical condition. I don't need time off or anything. Okay. You don't have to do any FMLA paperwork. There's no FMLA triggers by needing time off. If somebody needs time off, that's when FMLA is triggered. So anyway, back on topic. Wages. So we can allow, and again, it's up to our FMLA policy. So as a company, what we want to do, FMLA could be paid through some sort of other means, right? PTO, short-term, long-term disability, workers' compensation, but they would run together. So anytime somebody is on an FMLA situation where they qualify for FMLA, even if they have, let's just say, paid time off, or even if it's work comp, we want to run FMLA concurrent with that. And if you, as a company, if you want to give people more than 12 weeks and say, look, you can use 12 weeks of FMLA after 2 weeks of paid time off, and tack it on at the beginning or the end to extend the leave, that is totally fine. And I think that's the way the world is that's the direction the world is moving these days, especially at larger companies. So that is entirely fine if you want to give more. But it's just not required by law, right? So as an employer, could you say you need to burn all or half or 2/10 or whatever it is of your paid time off at the beginning of your FMLA leave of absence? You can absolutely do that. You can dictate how it's going to go. I will just tell you that however you treat people on FMLA, you're going to have to treat similar people similarly when they take military leave. Now, you can't make them burn the PTO, but we just want to make sure that we're being uniform across all other forms of unpaid leave, because military leave and FMLA, they both have provisions in them saying that however you treat people on other forms of unpaid leave, you need to treat people on FMLA, and you need to treat people under USERRA, under military leave, you need to treat them similarly. So we want to be mindful that we can't just like single out unpaid leaves, right? So we want to try to be as uniform as possible. But getting into some of the nuances, so some of the questions that often come up are, okay, I'm a commissioned salesperson and I just had a baby. I'm going to be gone for 3 months and I'm not going to get my commissions. I'm not going to get my sales. So what do I get with FMLA? Well, you get your 3 months. You get your 12 weeks. You get your 12 weeks and you get reinstated to your sales. And it's got to be the same or equivalent job, right? So you come back to essentially the same territory. Now, if the territories for everybody switched while the FMLA was going on, well, then that person, all ships rise, all ships sink, right? That person's territory would get jumbled as well. You don't have to treat the person, when everybody is being impacted, you don't need to treat the person any better or any worse just because they're on FMLA. Same if you have a reduction in force. You have a RIF and everybody gets fired over at this facility, you close down the facility. Well, you fire the person on FMLA as well. They don't get any extra protections just because they're on FMLA. Similar with commissions, with production-based bonuses. If commissions are based on sales and you're not selling, you don't need to be paid those commissions while you're on FMLA. If everybody on the team gets a raise just because they're awesome and because the whole team did, XYZ% increase in sales, well, then upon return from FMLA to work, that person should also get the increase in wage, because all boats rise, all boats fall. And so anytime but if it's production based, you don't need to prorate. You don't need to assume that the person would have sold X number of widgets while they were on FMLA. If you want to, because that's part of your culture and everything, that's great. But you don't have to. You don't have to provide them any sort of prorated benefits while they're on FMLA. Holidays, you don't need, if somebody is taking a full week off. So this week, a lot of employers, because of Easter on Sunday, a lot of employers will have some sort of Friday or maybe next Monday off. If somebody is on FMLA, they get 12 work weeks, right? And so let's just say they've been on FMLA for the entire month of April. They're gone the entire month of April and Easter, and you close down on the Monday after Easter. So this coming Monday, and you close down and there's a holiday, right? Do you need to credit the employee for that holiday? No, you don't have to credit them for that holiday. If that's a week, so you've got, let's just call it 4 exact weeks in April, they take their 4 weeks of FMLA. Do you need to pay them for the holiday? That's going to be up to you. So a lot of employers, I don't know the percentages, but a lot of employers will just, yes, they will pay for all holidays while somebody's on FMLA. They don't need to. Some employers will say, look, in order to be paid for a holiday, you need to work the day before and the day after. And that somebody on FMLA doesn't do that, or you need to at least have, PTO. And if the person on FMLA doesn't, then you don't need to pay them. But you can apply your policy there. Do you need to allow the person to accrue FMLA while they're PTO while they're on FMLA? Up to you. Whatever your policy says, you can write your FMLA policy to say that PTO accrues or sick leave, whatever it is, whatever your benefits are. You could say that they accrue during FMLA if you want. It's entirely you. Again, just go with the policy. One nuance I want to point out here is that if you can come up with a few different ways to get compensated for group medical benefits, right? So group medical benefits continue while somebody's on FMLA. A lot of times employees just stop paying. There are a number of ways, and they're laid out here in this slide, that you can collect on those benefits. One of the nuances I want to point out, though, is that if the employee doesn't pay, can you cancel their medical benefits while they're on FMLA? Yes. You need to notify them, and you need to give them at least 15 days notice before you cancel the benefits, and then you can cancel it. You got to give them at least 30 days. So you have to give them at least that first 30 days of benefits beforehand, and you got to give them at least 15 days notice. So could you send out a notice after 15 days and say, hey, your benefits are about to cancel in 15 days on the 30th day? That's going to be the end of it. Yeah, you could do that and just say, like, you got to pay your premium. Otherwise, we're going to consider it canceled. Interestingly, let's just say that happens. Let's just say you give the notices and you cancel the benefits after 30 days because the person didn't pay, and they lose their group medical coverage while they're on FMLA. Well, they're still on FMLA, right? And let's just say they take the full 12 weeks, 3 months, and they come back after 12 weeks. Can they opt back into your medical plan? Yes, they can opt back into your medical plan because they need to be reinstated to the same or equivalent job, including benefits. So they could jump back, even though they lost their medical benefits while on FMLA. They could jump back into your medical benefits upon reinstatement to FMLA. That's like rarely comes up for me, but I want to point it out just because I think it's one of those really interesting nuances. You can claw back the benefits that you've paid. If the employee does not, if you pay, let's just say you pay a premium, right? Most employers pay some sort of medical premium, whether they're under ACA or not. And everybody on this call is probably covered by ACA. So for sure, you're paying some sort of medical premium for the employees. Can you recover from the employer's share of the medical premium? And the answer is yes. If the employee does not return to work, unless it's because they don't return because of theirs or another covered employee under FMLA, like a child's serious health condition or some sort of circumstances, like let's just say their spouse got a new job and moved out of state and they had to like leave you during FMLA. Those would be, exceptional circumstances. But if the employee, as a general rule, doesn't return to work, except for those situations, those exceptions, could you claw back the benefits? And by the way, returning to work is more than 30 days. So if they come back to work for you for like a week or two and they say, ugh, I can't be away from my son or daughter, my new baby. This isn't going to work for me, and I quit. And they quit on like day 15. You can claw back the employer share of the medical premiums that they owe that you paid on their behalf while they were on FMLA. So yeah, you can go after them, go to sue them in court or something like that. You could try to work out a pay arrangement with them to pay you back for the share the payments that you made on their behalf, the employer share of the premiums. We've already covered a little bit of the reinstatement. I've already talked to you about the rule that it has to be the same or equivalent position. It really is that. It is the same or equivalent. You can have some very slight nuances, or if just general changes to your business occurred, could that also impact the person returning from FMLA? Yes. But as a general rule, it has to be the same or equivalent position with the same or equivalent pay, unless, again, all chips rose or fall and you had macro changes that were beyond, to that whole department or that whole entire location. I'd already mentioned this before. Sometimes we find information out that an employee did something, was hiding something, doing something bad, they were doing a badge, and we find it out while they're on FMLA. Does FMLA protect them? No. If you would fire or discipline them for doing whatever they did before they went on leave for FMLA, you can absolutely do it while they're on FMLA. And you could tell them, like, you're being fired. If you want to be nice, you can extend let them stay on FMLA, or you can just fire them at the time and just say, like, if you want to let them stay on FMLA, you just say, look, you'll get reinstated. We're not going to reinstate you. If you have a group-wide RIF or something like that affects everybody, it can also affect the employee on FMLA. You shouldn't be shy about that. Okay, some bonus tips, and then I think we're pretty close to being done. Let's see which ones we didn't cover here, because I know I covered a few of these. Yes, you get to accrue PTO while on FMLA. If the employee is not on group medical benefits, there's nothing to continue. That's not an opt-in opportunity for them just because they go on FMLA. The only opportunity to opt back in if they lose it is if upon return from FMLA. We talked about indefinite intermittent leave. So, okay, good. I feel like we covered some of those bonus tips. And okay, so we talked about the HR weapons of choice. Sorry, I know we have like 2 minutes here, and I'm just seeing, like, because I obviously foreshadowed some of these slides already. One of the HR weapons of choice, as you catch up on the slides because there's always a delay, is to rewrite your PTO policies to make them to marry them with your FMLA. And if you don't have an FMLA policy, you really should have an FMLA policy. Doing just the general notice that's required by law, that's on your laminated posters, that's great. You need to do that, but it's not enough. You should have a full FMLA policy as well, and it should talk about how PTO works, how holidays work. How it, is it going to run concurrent with work comp, with other forms of paid and unpaid leave? So you want to talk about all these because you have a lot of options to, you also want to talk about like how you measure FMLA. If you don't have a policy that says, if you're just using the posters and you don't have a policy that says how you measure your 12 weeks, then the employee is going to get the benefit of the most favorable measurement. Worst case scenario, if you don't have that and the employee then gets the calendar year basis, which means they could take like 3 months off, like, October, November, December, and then boom, they get a whole new 12-week period, January, February, March. They could take literally 6 months off consecutively if you don't have this laid out in an FMLA policy. So I really, really encourage everybody to have an FMLA policy that talks about PTO, and it talks about how all of these things work with running concurrent benefits. Okay, that's it. Hour's over. Next webinar, we are going to talk about supervisor reviews, and it's just one of those topics that supervisors really need to be better at, just generally across the board. I'm not picking on anybody, but supervisors often give really terrible reviews, and then they end up being problematic when we end up defending on lawsuits. So we're gonna spend a whole hour next month in May, and we're going to talk about supervisor reviews and how to do better reviews and verbiage to use and not to use, and hopefully we'll all be for the better, and you'll have more tools in your bucket or whatever of tools to talk about with supervisors and managers when they do reviews. Thank you for your time and attention. If you have any questions, and if you're welcome to reach out to me directly at kmosher@thompsonco.com, or give me a call, or any of our other attorneys at Thompson Co. Thanks.